My name is Richard Swatton, and I've been an astrologer for over 2/3 of my lifetime. And welcome to this review of the sun signs. My intention, however, is to try and get beneath the signs, within them, look at the structural processes operating, because the signs of the zodiac are more than a list of correspondences or character associations or particular forms of behavior. Those are interesting, and they were noted very well in the 1970s with Linda Goodman's sun signs. How to spot an Aries, how to spot a Leo, how to spot a particular sign. Certain characteristics are indeed entertaining. But what I'm interested in is looking at the root principles of the sign, the ordering processes. The signs really start off by taking the qualities of the seasons, because the zodiac as a whole is actually a tale, a story of an ordering process. And each one of the signs has a specific thing to say in the overall cycle of the year. We could say that the signs are the seasonal moods, and each season passes through 3 stages. There are 4 seasons, and so therefore this is obviously relating to the 12 signs. Each sign has an image, but in that image is condensed a whole variety of things, from mythic associations, ancient wisdom traditions. Each sign has a response mechanism and a type of behavior that goes with it. It's as if it reacts to life in a particular way. And you could also see the signs perhaps as a particular tint or a mode of perception through which people look. And so when they're seeing, they kind of select things from the world through their sun sign because they have an affinity with it. It reflects them in some way. The signs are an embodiment of nature, and so they don't just operate in the human vehicle, they operate everywhere. The signs also have an innate ordering principle, a teleology, an intent or a purpose to them. These are tale to be told. It's as if there is, as I say, a developing process in each sign that the sun sign in particular will show what this ordering process is. When we become our sun sign, what we become is more connected to our individual purpose. The word purpose is interesting in this regard. It means finding one's own place. Psychologically, it means finding one's identity, one's will to live, and then put that out with intent, radiating from a center of which the sign expresses when the sun is within it. The symbol of the sun is quite obvious, really. It's the central planet. Astrologers call the sun and the moon and all of the other planets, just for convenience. But it's the central ordering principle around which all of the others revolve. The sun in the sign, therefore, gives us an idea about this central ordering principle and the pattern of unfoldment around the rest. So if you can see the zodiac as a kind of cake with lots of candles on it, the sun is the brightest candle, the one that makes most sense. It brings it all together. If we lose touch with our sun sign, our sense of individuality, our sense of purpose, our sense of direction, or the will to live, as Alan Leo called it, he called the sun the life bringer, then we have a sense of chaos, purposeless direction, and a kind of just sinking into the flow of different instincts and feelings and needs, all without a kind of central symbol. The images of the sun are quite a few, from the father to the president, the king of a country, the pharaoh indeed. In fact, the ancient civilizations of Egypt revolved around this center of the sun, the main deity. The sun however, is just the carrier of consciousness, just as the king was thought to be the supreme container of a kind of ordering principle in the state. As Apollo, the sun god, he is the father principle, the breaker of curses, the bringer of civilization, of prophecy, and he brings music. As a kind of champion or a hero, he is a very important character in the Greek pantheon. Helios, though, has a very important principle too to bring into operation here. Helios is just the carrier of the sun. In other words, what he represents is similar to what our psychology is. Our psychology carries consciousness in a particular form, but it isn't actually consciousness itself. So the sun, although it radiates and illumines our life and brings purpose and meaning to it, it isn't consciousness itself. It's just the awareness of our own unique and individual path that is portrayed throughout the sun sign itself, and therefore will lead us to a sense of unique and individual destiny. So we arrive at the second sign of fire, Leo, the lion. I'd start this section off with a big roar, but I'm not a particularly good impersonator. In Leo, what we have is the magnificence of an animal named the king of the beasts. And so his association with kingliness, nobility, honor, reward, a sense of being important is all connected to this sign. It isn't the kingliness, however, of order or state as it is in Capricorn. It isn't a sense of the light or the heat of Aries. It is the light of the divine essence behind the formation of the ego, or what psychologists call the formation of the ego. Now, what I mean to say by this is that Aries, if we see these as stages in the development of the individual being, Aries is that force which brings us in, makes us alive. It's the sense of existence. It's force rather than form. It comes into Taurus and it embodies a form. Taurus is the bull. It becomes a body. And then this duality between body and mind or spiritual force is set up, and we see this duality taking place in Gemini, the twins. There is an interaction between them both. After this, the next stage in the development, astrological development, is Cancer. And Cancer has a sense of belonging to something, maybe to family, maybe to one street or community, maybe to a whole lineage or the nation. But Cancer has a sense of emotional belonging, so it has a home, it has a place in which it can be felt to be secure. But in Leo, here we get, as I say, the next fire sign, and it's in Leo that the child or the developing ego seems to have something unique to say. It isn't just about belonging, it isn't just about physical form. The Leo has an imagination. He goes into the playground and becomes dramatic. There's this automatic sense of fun that derives from somewhere within him. Sometimes he may even complain about doing this or that. It's because his imagination, what sparked it off, and the excitement of the new and the fresh and the vital, particularly in the imagination, and the sense of the dramatic and wanting to play and give form to the inner life, all seen in the playground of children. I remember myself, as I recall this process, being 5 or 6 in my primary school. And I remember going out for the first time in the playground, and there we all were, and I wanted to play Doctor Who, and the other people played the Daleks. And we didn't care, we just played together in this kind of simple kind of way. This is why Leo is called often the sign of the child or the divine child. We'll get to its meaning in terms of the king later, but it essentially expresses the generativity, the quality of something being brought forth from within, from somewhere. What is it that illumines this bright spark of energy behind the ego development? Now, the problem with Leo, as it continues on this journey of expressing itself and its imaginative form, its generativity, its creativity, is that sometimes it confuses the difference between the outer glamour of something, the initial excitement, with the expression of the personality. You see, personality simply means mask. Persona means mask, it's Latin for it. So the personality is the mask of something underneath. This is why in medical astrology, Leo rules the heart, because it is the center, the heart of something, behind what is presented. And as I say, sometimes the journey of Leo, or the main central pattern in Leo, which is the pattern of the hero, which I shall come to in a moment, is finding what it is, what is the spiritual source behind one's generativity, behind one's activity of the ego, behind the formation of so many creative elements that come out of an unknown self. Whether Leo consciously know this or not, or they live it out unconsciously, the main operating principle within the sign is that of the development of the hero. Now, the great mythologist Joseph Campbell has a lot to say about the hero. We can summarize it simply that the hero is a person that finds that the ordinary, that where they're living, the complacency of the sameness of where they're living is, they get agitated about it and must leave the home, must leave Cancer behind, which is the previous sign. They must leave that because there's a need to follow an individual destiny. And they're called into that destiny through various trials and tribulations, and as it were, they're aiming at something. And then eventually, through those initiations, they achieve something. They achieve something great, something as of personal value, which then can be given to the collective or the rest of us. And so it is the duty of the Leo to find what it is that's unique and special, to recognize this quality in themselves and then give it to others. Now, that's what Campbell describes as the heroic myth. There are variations of it and there are different stages. But in the Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is, he calls it the monomyth, the single prevalent myth in many cultural mythologies, you have this feature of the hero. Now, every sign can be a hero, because every sign has a sun in it. The hero is in fact the sun itself. But it seems as if the life process, the shape, the general structure, and even sometimes the character of the individual with Leo seems to represent this in their lives. There's always a leaving behind of something known. There's always this quest to find what it is. What is that spark of interest? What is my purpose in life? Who does it serve? Does it serve God or my own ego or someone else? Does it serve my own grandiosity? Asks Leo. I think they have to go through this phase of the confusion between who does the Grail serve, which is, of course, the great heroic myth of Parzival, which we shall come to in a moment. Now, the hero myth itself derived from a very, very basic form of the first 6 signs, where the sun rises over the horizon, and it reaches the noon position overhead. In a way, this is equivalent to Cancer, which is the midsummer. But by the time we've reached Leo, around about the 23rd of July or so, the sun has heated up everything. It's brought things forth, it's ripened them. The fruit that we saw, the fruitfulness of being we saw as the sun in Cancer, has given a lot of heat. It's brought potential into actuality. Now this process will not be completed until Virgo, until the fully ripe sheaf of corn is cut. That is a different element in this process. But the heroic struggle of the sun rising to the midday point, going over to Leo, which is, as I say, the full ripening of something, eventually into Virgo, which then it cuts, and then into Libra, in which the hero sets, or the sun sets, and begins a different kind of journey. Now, in preparation for this recording, I went over a film that impressed me many years ago called Excalibur by John Boorman. And this is I thought it was a brilliant film, brilliantly shot, and a wonderful story, and some wonderful actors in it. And I don't know whether he knew it at the time, but the person that plays Parzival in that myth of the Arthurian legends and Merlin and King Arthur was somebody called Paul Jeffrey, who is in fact a Leo. So he plays the leading role, the heroic figure that starts out as a fool, starts out losing himself in the woods, and one day he sees a knight in shining armor, and it's the glamour of that armor which fulfills his imagination, and he says, I want to be a knight. And he follows the knight to the great Camelot. And the significance of this is very important, because what Parzival sees or intuits at that time is that he could be somebody significant. I actually think, thinking about it now, it must be the story of all of the fire signs to seek significance. Perhaps one of their fears is not being unique, not being special, not having some cause, not just to fight, but to express, to become. But that's only half the tale. He gets to the castle and, of course, immediately wants his sword or immediately wants his armor. He wants to become a shining one, a brilliant person, somebody important. But, of course, he's sent to the kitchens to learn the basic trade, to learn to serve, first of all. This was what was always taught in the Western Mystery tradition, you know in order to serve. Later on in the myth, which is a very important myth for Leo, is that he comes to serve the king. And the king is a representative of this divine source behind the ego. Behind the sense of individual identity lies this creative essence. Aurobindo, who was one of the greatest sages of the last 2 centuries, his name, by the way, means teacher of the divine seed, or the shining seed. Oro meaning shining, and Bindu meaning seed. Sri Aurobindo meaning teacher. His definition of the purpose of life, something like this. He said that you need to possess, to express, and to own the divine nature within an animalistic and egoistic consciousness. And he was himself a Leo. I don't think you could express this more, that somehow in the roar, in the excitement, in the pizzazz, and in the expression of the individual self, there is this divine presence within that Parzival ultimately must serve. But the myth doesn't stop there. It continues on. And it continues on because Parzival is he who must find that missing substance, that missing grail, which will renew and refresh the spirit. And he loses his way in doing that. And I won't go into it too much because this is going to be supplied in some of the texts and some references made in the text to these signs which accompanies these videos. But it's a wonderful moment towards the end of the film where we see Parzival almost giving up in his search for this divine essence which will serve the sick king and bring the land and the life force back to being. And it's a scene where his armor has all got a bit faded and a bit muddy and so on. He falls into this stream. He falls into the lake. And he's dying because the weight of this armor is taking him down. And when I saw this, I thought I would bring it here because suddenly I realized that in Leo, it's where you build up a significance for yourself egotistically. Sometimes it's a need for notoriety or fame, and it's another theme that I will come to in a minute, or some sense of self-importance or self-creation, and the ego takes hold of it. But this armoring, what was once so glamorous, is the thing which is dropping him, which is the thing which is taking him downward away from himself. And so what happens towards it is we see when the dramatic music of another Leo, the music is provided by Wagner, who was himself a Leo, a massive dramatic operatic moment when all of this armor falls away. And this is the highly significant moment for the Leo's development, where what they've been built up in terms of egotistic consciousness or egoism or in form of a personality is finally is the weight that they carry, which needs to drop away in order for you to see the authentic being underneath. The search for authenticity and sincerity behind the armor is really what this the search for the Grail is. And to confuse the glamour, the shiny armor, for the actual is the problem of the sign. So he falls away. He comes out of the sea or the lake naked, and finally manages to get the Grail and hands it over to the king, who then becomes whole. In the personality, in form of psychology, sometimes the early part of the mythology here, the one where Parzival is trying to find his own unique gifts, can cause a bit of a stir. But mind you, that's what Leo want to do. They do want the spotlight on themselves. They seek a kind of uniqueness. But if it's in the form of fame or notoriety, or perhaps even worse, celebrity, it can go a bit wrong. This is what I meant by falling in love with the glamour of the personality and the creations that come out of the self. One can say, wow, I created those. But creativity is, although it's a function of human consciousness, it doesn't come from the human being itself. It comes through, and so it serves the king, the divine essence behind creativity. That's the point of it. Now, I want to introduce you a slight detour because there's a wonderful book. I think it's a wonderful book by Professor Daniel Boorstin in the 1960s called The Image. And what it's about is the falling in love with the image as opposed to the reality behind the image. Bringing in advertising, things like that, where we have adverts for one kind of washing powder or another that says whiter than white. Well, that's advertising for you. It glamorizes something to the point of absurdity. So the celebrity is, in a way, what's happened is he points out that our culture has become less heroic, less great, and it tends to define greatness more in terms of the amount of airtime that one has, or the amount of images that one has presented through the newspapers or in film or in cinema. You see, in fact, you don't get a lot of Leo actors. Many of them are Gemini or Pisceans, some Cancerians. But the Leo actor isn't, they are there, but they're few and far between. The point here is that what Boorstin says is that there's a great difference between fame, notoriety, and greatness or heroism. And in the 20th century, they become very confused. Being a celebrity is about being well known for being well known. It is being notorious for the sake of being notorious. The person has become what he calls a pseudo-event, and then one celebrity after the other somehow then parades themselves in accolade or applause for the self, or what comes out, and it has this sense of fakeness which has an ever-increasing volume to it. It's a kind of, so say, that part of the Parzival myth where he's finding his own uniqueness, but then can confuse the glamour for the real or the genuine underneath. And so this seeking fame or seeking this largesse of life, they can be overbearing in their personality. And sometimes when another person has the limelight, you can often find Leo putting up their hand or speaking louder. They have a gestural quality to their being which is rather overblown and operatic. In its negative sense, it can be vainglorious, so seeking glory just for the sake of glory rather than for anything truly great underneath. And these qualities in the personality are really what need to be discerned and then separated out so that the personality itself can be seen as the front, as I say, of a creative source, the sun, behind the expression of the personality. This was mostly shown by a great Leo, great psychologist of the 20th century, C.G. Jung, who himself followed this quality of heroic dynamism. He started out as a very important man, and he was going to be the champion of the Freudian cause of psychoanalysis. He was deemed to be the divine child that had come along, and that when he was going to move psychoanalysis forward, and him and Freud, who was a Taurus, had a very, very close relationship for a while. But Jung had something happen to him around about middle age, around about 38, 39, 40. And he realized something, that he hadn't really formed anything distinct or unique in his own thoughts. He knew it was there, but he knew that he couldn't follow somebody else's path, and so therefore gave it all up. And once he gave it all up, he fell into that wasteland in the Parzival myth, and also the T.S. Eliot wasteland is about this. It's the wandering through depressions. It's the wandering through the whole imaginative side of life, and to find out what it is in the creativity of the individual which is going to bring them an ultimate sense of satisfaction. Mick Jagger summarizes this neatly in his great song, who is, of course, I think a treble Leo, ascendant in Leo, Venus in Leo, Sun in Leo. I can't get no satisfaction, he says. Well, ultimately, I suppose no Leo can get ultimate satisfaction, because their satisfaction lies in a quality of immortality. So what Jung did was that he entered a phase, he entered his own depression, he sought in it what was coming from himself, what was innately unique. And throughout that journey of discovery, he found, like Parzival, that it served a higher purpose. It served what he called the self with a capital S. And through this, he founded a psychology called analytical psychology, which has as its heart the process of individuation. I think only a Leo could come up with that term. But individuation was about finding out what the unique aspects of the personality are, differentiating them, and then ultimately resting in them as a quality of what one should be doing in life, rather than identifying oneself with the personality. This was the Jungian vision, to find the heart of the self behind the presentational form. Fun, excitement, entertainment, making something dramatic, operatic, finding something that brings you alive in the imagination is the quality of Leo that it brings to things. It makes things magic. It isn't just the tinsel town of the Oscar ceremonies or the BAFTA awards. It's more than that. It's the lifting up of the imagination to the eyes of heaven to make something truly significant. Some of its qualities are, it doesn't know its generosity. It can be magnanimous and open, and it can open the channels of heroism into other people. They provide an example in life, provided they've followed the route of the hero themselves, that they can be that quality in life as in service to other people. So, 2 life lessons. There is a divine gift in everyone, and you need to find it. And secondly, I think the Leo message or the life lesson to everyone is try and find out who you truly are. What is the authentic being behind the facade of personality? To speak that, to express that, to become that without shame. That is the heart, I believe, of the Leo message. As a final coda, I would like to read out 4 lines from a poem by Henry Longfellow. This poem, which was for the great abolitionist, Charles Sumner, an aggressive abolitionist senator from Massachusetts. He writes this: "So when a great man dies for years beyond our ken, the light he leaves behind him lies upon the paths of men."